Our school's English-only policy was so strict, kids were suspended for talking to their parents. I was my grandmother's 911 emergency contact, and I had to choose between the rule and her life. I chose her, and my principal recorded me as evidence to have me suspended. What was the most racist rule at your school? At ours, it was simple: English only all the time. Our principal, Mr. Harris, was obsessed. He loved giving assemblies about how English is the language of success and how linguistic unity creates a strong school identity. What he meant was that the sounds of our homes, our families, were not welcome. One day, he claimed he overheard a group of sophomore boys plotting in Spanish by the lockers. From that day on, the school transformed. Teachers, who had once been kind, now patrolled the hallways, the bathrooms, and even the student parking lot, their ears tuned for anything that wasn't English. One word of Spanish, one syllable of Vietnamese, one greeting in Haitian Creole. It all meant the same thing: 3 days of suspension and a permanent note on your record. For me, and for so many others, this rule was a daily exercise in exhaustion and stress. Spanish was the language of my home. It was the language I spoke with my abuela, grandmother, who lived with us and spoke no English. It was the language I used to comfort my mom after her long shifts at the warehouse. Going an entire school day without a single word of it felt like walking around with a gag in my mouth, my real voice, my familiar voice, trapped in my throat. The impact was immediate and devastating. My mom, who had always loved coming to my choir concerts, stopped attending all school events after a teacher helpfully corrected her accent during a parent-teacher night, leaving her flushed with a shame she didn't deserve. Kids would frantically hang up on their parents mid-call rather than risk being overheard answering in their native language and getting suspended. I saw my friend David get suspended for 3 days for calling out, "Y abuela, cuidado!" when his grandmother almost tripped on the curb while picking him up. Another senior, a brilliant kid named Pierre, lost his valedictorian status and a potential scholarship for accidentally cursing in French when he dropped a chemistry beaker and stubbed his toe. The Puerto Rican kids, the Vietnamese kids, the Haitian kids, the Dominican kids, we all walked around like ghosts. Half ourselves, I became the emergency contact for my abuela. She had worsening heart problems, and my mom's job at a warehouse 40 minutes away with a strict no-phones policy on the floor meant I was the first line of defense. I kept my phone hidden, buried deep in my backpack, vibrating on silent. My entire life became a high-stakes balancing act. My grandmother's health on one side, my entire academic future on the other. For 2 years, I perfected the art of avoidance. I learned to swallow Spanish words before they could escape, even when other kids, the ones who only spoke English, would try to trick me into responding as a joke. I also figured out workarounds that technically didn't break the rule. When abuela called during lunch, I'd answer with just yes, and no, while she spoke to me in a rapid-fire stream of Spanish, making it look to anyone watching like I was just agreeing with someone speaking English nearby. But the close calls were terrifying. Once, she had a minor fall in the kitchen and called me during the chaos of passing period. I had to sprint into a bathroom stall, lock the door, and stand there, my heart pounding, saying nothing but yes, no, yes, yes, into the phone while she, confused and in pain, asked me questions I couldn't answer. I was terrified someone would hear her voice through the phone. I resorted to tapping codes we'd developed on the mouthpiece. 3 taps meant, "Take your heart medicine." 4 taps meant, "Call Mom right now." It took 15 agonizing minutes to confirm she was okay, and I was marked late for chemistry. But at least I hadn't been suspended. I thought I could keep managing. I thought I could juggle these 2 impossible worlds with my codes and my one-word answers until graduation. Abuela knew the rule and tried not to call unless it was a real emergency, but sometimes she'd forget or get confused. We even set up a system with our neighbor, Maria, who would text me first if something was really wrong, so I'd know to step off school property before calling back. But emergencies don't always follow your careful plans. It happened during 3rd period history. We were taking notes on the Gilded Age. My phone, silenced in my pocket, began to vibrate. Not just once, but a frantic, insistent buzz. Psst, 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 psst. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. 12 times. I finally checked it under my desk. Maria, neighbor. 12 missed calls. My blood went cold. Maria only had this number for Abuela. She had never called more than twice. My hands were shaking as I watched the missed calls climb to 20, then 25. She was panicking. The second our teacher, Mr. Henderson, turned his back to write on the whiteboard, I slipped out the classroom door. I didn't ask. I just left. I sprinted down the empty hallway, fumbling with my phone, and called her back. Maria answered on the first ring, screaming in Spanish. Mija tu abuela. No puede respirar. Honey, your grandmother. She can't breathe. She said Abuela had collapsed on the kitchen floor and was barely breathing. The paramedics were there, but Maria couldn't translate the name of Abuela's heart medication. There was a long, complex name for the one she needed, and it sounded terrifyingly similar to the one she was deathly allergic to. In her panic, Maria kept mixing them up. I can't understand, Maria sobbed. They're holding 2 bottles. No sé cuál es. I don't know which one it is. I tried our tapping system, but she was crying too hard to listen. I tried typing the name in a text, but she couldn't read my screen to the paramedics while holding the phone to her ear. There was no creative solution. My grandmother was dying. I had to choose. Pásame al paramédico, I yelled, running down the hall. Put the paramedic on the phone. I ran out the main entrance, speaking rapid-fire Spanish, praying the paramedic would understand something. My grandmother, Maria Rodriguez. She needs her heart medication. La medicina en la botella blanca. The white bottle. Not the blue one! La botella azul es penicilina. Es alérgica. Ma'am? Ma'am, slow down. I don't understand you, a man's voice said, sounding stressed. My brain completely short-circuited. I stopped on the sidewalk, my lungs burning, and switched. She's allergic. Allergic to penicillin. The blue bottle is penicillin. Do not give her the blue bottle. Okay, I understand, the paramedic said. Which one does she need? The white bottle. Amiodarona. It's in the bathroom, 3rd shelf behind the vitamins. Dile a María en el gabinete del baño. La botella blanca. I was frantically translating back and forth, explaining to him in English, then yelling instructions to Maria in Spanish, who was relaying them. I was so focused on the details on the life-or-death translation that I didn't notice Principal Harris standing by the main entrance, his arms crossed, watching me. He had his phone out, the camera lens pointed directly at my face, his expression completely unreadable as he recorded me speaking the forbidden language that was saving my grandmother's life. My abuela survived. The doctor at the hospital, a kind woman with tired eyes, told us later that evening. She pulled my mom and me aside in the hallway. The paramedics were moments away from administering the penicillin, she said, her voice low. If you hadn't clarified her allergy exactly when you did, she would have gone into anaphylactic shock on top of the cardiac event. You saved her life, mija. My mom, her face streaked with tears, just hugged me, muttering, Gracias a Dios over and over. I felt a rush of profound relief, but it was hollow. The image of Principal Harris, his phone held steady, his face an impassive mask, was burned into my mind. I had saved my grandmother, but I had a sinking feeling I had just destroyed my future. The next morning, the dread was so thick I could barely swallow. I walked into my first period English class, and the room went dead silent. Every eye was on me. Principal Harris was sitting at my teacher's desk, his laptop open, a single manila folder placed perfectly beside it. My teacher, Ms. Alvarez, stood nervously in the corner, wringing her hands, refusing to meet my gaze. Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez, Harris said, his voice as calm and sterile as a hospital hallway. Please take a seat. Your classmates can wait a moment. I sat down at my desk, my legs feeling like concrete blocks. The whole class stared. He turned his laptop toward me and pressed play. There I was, a grainy, blue-tinted version of myself from the hallway security camera. He hadn't just used his phone. He'd pulled the official footage. The audio was shockingly clear. My own voice frantic, desperate, switching rapidly between languages. La botella azul es penicilina. Es alérgica. She's allergic. Do not give her the blue bottle! Dile a María en el gabinete del baño. He let it play for a full agonizing minute, the sound of my forbidden language filling the silent classroom. Then he clicked, stop. Would you like to explain, he said, his voice flat. Not a question, but a judgment. Why you believed you were exempt from our English-only policy. He pulled a suspension form from the folder and slid it across the desk. My name was already neatly typed at the top in all caps. My mouth was desert dry. My hands resting on my lap started to shake. My grandmother was dying, I managed to say, my voice raspy. The paramedics were about to give her the wrong medication. They couldn't understand my neighbor. I had to translate. Mr. Harris held up a hand, a gesture of bored dismissal that cut me to the quick. Emergencies do not override school policy, Ms. Rodriguez. You are aware of the rules. There are always other options. You could have found an English-speaking adult. You could have requested an administrator to assist. There was no time, I whispered, my voice cracking. She would have died. He just stared at me, his eyes cold. That is a suspension form for 3 days. It will be placed on your permanent record. We take willful defiance of our policies very seriously here. It shows a lackats when he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick packet of papers stapled at the corner, with yellow highlighter marks all over them. Your disciplinary hearing is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m., he said, pushing the packet toward me. You have the right to bring a parent or guardian, but please be advised, all proceedings will be conducted in English only. The bell rang, a shrill, violent sound that made me jump. The other students who had been holding their breath scrambled for their bags, a collective exhale of tension. They filed out, a few shooting me looks of pity, most just staring at their phones, eager to text the latest gossip. Mr. Harris packed up his laptop, collected his form, and walked out, leaving me alone at my desk with the hearing packet in my hands. Whispers followed me down the hall. Spanish jail, did you see her face? So stupid, why'd she do it? My face burned hot. I felt like an animal in a zoo. Before I could even get to my next class, the office secretary intercepted me. Ms. Rodriguez, you're excused from classes today. You are to remain in the administrative office until dismissal. I spent the next 6 hours in that hard plastic chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my head aching. The secretary handed me a blank form. Write your official statement about the incident. I tried. I stared at the blank lines, my mind a jumble of English and Spanish. How could I explain a life-and-death panic in the cold, formal English of a disciplinary report? Every sentence I wrote sounded either too emotional, which they'd dismiss as hysterical, or too weak, which they'd see as an admission of guilt. My own grammar, faltering under the stress, felt like another betrayal, another way to prove I wasn't one of them. After my 5th attempt, I crumpled the paper. Can I please get a copy of the security video? I asked, my voice hoarse. The one Mr. Harris showed? The secretary didn't look up. That's internal school property, not for student access. My stomach dropped. They could use their evidence against me, but I couldn't use it to defend myself. The unfairness of it all made my jaw clench so tight my teeth hurt. My phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Abuela stable, mija, but very weak. She keeps asking for you. The relief that she was okay was so sharp it made me dizzy, but it was immediately followed by a wave of guilt. I should have been there. I would have been there if I wasn't trapped in this office. I shoved the unsigned form back across the desk and walked out, ignoring the secretary calling after me. A note was taped to my locker. Guidance office appointment tomorrow. 9 a.m. Mr. Orlando Frey. Mr. Frey. The name was vaguely familiar. He was the new bilingual counselor, the one kids whispered about, the one who actually understood. A tiny, fragile sliver of hope cut through the dread. Maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. That night, the house was suffocating. Mom sat at the kitchen table, the disciplinary packet spread out under the harsh fluorescent light. When she read the line, Review of Enrollment Status, all the color drained from her face. ¿Qué significa esto? She whispered, her English faltering. They can kick you out? For this? I think so, Mommy, I said, my own voice trembling. It's a mark on my permanent record. My scholarship applications, they all ask about disciplinary action. Mom, who had worked double shifts at the warehouse for a decade so I could be the first in our family to go to college, looked utterly broken. She'd endured a teacher correcting her accent in front of a room full of parents, but this was a direct assault on the one thing we were all working towards. This rule, she said, her voice low and furious. This rule is designed to break us. The next morning, I went to my 9 a.m. appointment with Mr. Orlando Frey. His office was small, crammed with books and colorful textiles from different countries, a stark contrast to the beige, sterile hallways of the rest of the school. He closed the door, gestured to a comfortable chair, not a hard plastic one, and said, "Okay, dime to do. Tell me everything. In English or Spanish, I don't care." I almost burst into tears at the simple kindness of that. For the next 30 minutes, I told him. Everything. The constant stress of the rule. The fear. Abuela's heart condition. The panicked call, the frantic translation, and Harris's cold, vindictive response. I told him about the scholarship, about Mom, about the whispers. He listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When I finished, he leaned forward. "First," he said, "what you did was incredibly brave and you were put in an impossible situation. You saved your grandmother's life. Full stop." He then laid out the reality. Legally, the school has broad authority to set its own conduct policies. However, this English-only rule is a textbook Title VI violation, which prohibits discrimination based on national origin. The problem, as Mr. Guidry will tell you, is that proving it and fighting it takes months, even years. Harris knows this. He's counting on you graduating or giving up before any federal complaint gets traction. He was the first adult in the building who hadn't made me feel crazy. "So, what do I do?" I asked. "We fight back," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not on their terms, but on ours. First, you will formally request in writing a Spanish interpreter for your mother at the hearing. They will almost certainly deny it, and that denial is a key piece of evidence for your grievance. Second, you get proof of the emergency. Call the hospital. Get a letter from that ER doctor. Get statements from the paramedics. Third," he pulled a student handbook from his shelf and flipped to a page. "You cite their own policy, the district's non-discrimination policy. You show them how their rule violates their rule." He gave me the name of Ruben Guidry at a legal aid group. "He's the best. He'll be blunt, but he'll tell you the truth." I left Mr. Frey's office feeling like I could finally breathe. I had a plan. During lunch, I sat in the parking lot and made the call to the hospital's patient advocacy department. The administrator was hesitant. "Ma'am, we can't just release medical details." "I'm not asking for her records," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I'm asking for a letter confirming my translation, my voice, prevented a fatal medication error. Your doctor told me I saved her life. Please. My school is trying to expel me for it." A long silence. "Let me see what I can do," the administrator finally said, her voice softening. "It will take a few days. After school, my chemistry teacher, Ms. Blevins, asked me to stay behind." She quickly closed the door, her hands shaking. "I heard what happened," she whispered. "I can't testify. Harris would have my job, but this rule is wrong. Look at this." She pointed to the same non-discrimination page Mr. Frey had shown me. "Make copies. Use it. It directly contradicts his policy." That night, Ruben Guidry called. He was blunt, just as Mr. Frey had predicted. "It's a hell of a case, kid, but it's a slow one. We can file a Title VI complaint, but that won't stop the hearing on Thursday. Your best bet is to build a rock-solid case for that hearing. Make them so afraid of a lawsuit that they back down." The next day, I went to the office and handed the secretary a typed, formal request for a Spanish interpreter for my mother at the hearing. She barely looked up. "We don't provide interpreters for disciplinary hearings," she recited from memory. "Only for IEP or 504 meetings." "Thank you," I said, noting her exact words, the time, and her name. As I was leaving, Assistant Principal Mike Farr caught me in the hall. "Kid," he sighed, looking tired. Harris is dug in. He sees this as a challenge to his authority. "I can make this go away. You take Saturday detention, and I'll make the suspension disappear from your record. Just stop fighting." The offer was tempting. One Saturday to make it all vanish. To save my scholarship. But I thought of David, suspended for calling to his abuela. Pierre, who lost his scholarship for cursing in French. "No thank you, Mr. Farr," I said. "I can't do that." The rumors, fueled by the social media post about my situation, were getting worse. Kids I'd known for years whispered as I passed. Some tried to bait me, calling out to me in Spanish to see if I'd respond and get in more trouble. I just kept my head down, the isolation complete. That's when I decided I needed more than just my story. During lunch, I quietly approached the Vietnamese kid from my math class and the Haitian girl from band. I asked them about the rule. Their stories poured out. One girl lost her National Honor Society spot for answering her mom's call in Vietnamese. The Haitian boy's parents stopped coming to his games, afraid they'd speak French by accident. They were all too scared to speak up, but they agreed to write anonymous statements. That evening, I sat at my computer and typed up a formal grievance to the school district, citing discrimination Title VI and the denial of interpreter services. I attached the anonymous statements. I hit send. There was no going back. The next morning, the intimidation started. Principal Harris was everywhere. He was in the hallway when I got to my locker. He walked through the cafeteria while I was trying to eat. He stood near the bathroom when I needed to go. He never said a word, just watched. His presence was a constant looming threat. I texted Mr. Frey every time, time-stamping the surveillance. During lunch, Mom called, crying. Her boss had told her if she missed any more work for school meetings, he'd cut her hours. We needed every dollar for Abuela's new medications. Don't come to the hearing, Mommy, I told her, my heart breaking. It's okay. No, she said, her voice fierce. No, estoy contigo. I am with you. I am not letting you face him alone. My phone buzzed with an email. The Scholarship Committee. We are required to review all disciplinary records before making final decisions. We will be checking your permanent record next week. This wasn't just about 3 days anymore. This was about everything. The night before the hearing was a blur of frantic preparation and suffocating anxiety. My mom and I sat at the kitchen table, which had become our war room. We organized documents into a binder. The hospital administrator's email, the anonymous statements from other students, the highlighted page from the district handbook. The denial of an interpreter, Orlando Frey, the counselor, came over after dinner. He helped me write down a clear, factual timeline, stripping out the emotion, focusing on the facts. Stick to this, he advised. Don't let them rattle you or make it about your attitude. Make it about the facts. As he was leaving, my phone buzzed. A text from a classmate I barely knew. It was a shaky cell phone video. It showed Principal Harris standing by the main entrance during the emergency, his personal phone clearly out, recording me as I ran, frantic, on my own emergency call. It wasn't just school security footage. He had deliberately recorded me himself, like a hunter documenting his prey. I forwarded it to Mr. Fry and Ruben Guidry immediately, my hands shaking with anger. That night, Abuela sat with me in the kitchen, not fully understanding the legal complexities, but knowing I was in a fight. She took my face in her hands. Habla tu verdad, mija, she said in Spanish, her voice firm. Speak your truth. Even if it costs you everything, truth is more important than their rules. I wrote her words down on an index card, a source of strength. The morning of the hearing, my stomach was in knots. Mom took the day off work, a choice that meant losing pay we couldn't afford. We walked into the school's conference room, a long, polished table under fluorescent lights. Principal Harris sat at the head, his laptop open. Mike Farr, the assistant principal, was there, along with a woman I didn't recognize, the district representative, her face neutral. My English teacher was also there as the required teacher representative, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Harris didn't waste time. He played the security footage again, my frantic bilingual plea echoing in the quiet room. As you can see, he said, a clear, willful violation of school policy. He slid the suspension form across the table. Then it was my turn. I felt my mom's hand tremble on my arm. But as I started to speak, my voice, though quiet, was steady. I explained the emergency, my abuela's condition, the medication mix-up. Emergencies don't override policy, Harris interrupted. With respect, sir, I said, my heart pounding. I believe the policy itself is the problem. I slid the hospital letter across the table. The district rep picked it up and read it, her eyebrows rising. This is from the ER attending, Dr. Lin, she noted. It states your translation prevented a potentially fatal medication error. I was saving her life, I said, and I was punished for it. Harris started to argue, but the district rep held up a hand. Let her finish. I presented the rest. The highlighted page from their own handbook, explicitly forbidding discrimination based on national origin. The written denial of an interpreter for my mother, a potential violation of her civil rights. The stack of anonymous, heartbreaking statements from Vietnamese and Haitian students, detailing how the rule had cost them scholarships, isolated them, and made them afraid to speak to their own families. This policy, I said, my voice gaining strength, isn't creating linguistic unity. It's creating fear. It's punishing students for who they are. It's dangerous. The room was silent. Harris's face was red. Mike Farr was studying his legal pad. The district rep looked between Harris and me, her expression unreadable. "If I may," she said, "Mr. Harris, the district's non-discrimination policy seems to be in direct conflict with this school-level English-only mandate. Furthermore, the video submitted by the student," she nodded toward the cell phone video I'd sent, "showing you personally recording a student in distress rather than offering aid, is concerning," Harris sputtered. "I was documenting a willful violation." "You were documenting a child during a medical emergency," the rep cut him off, her voice cold. "An emergency that was confirmed by the hospital." They went back and forth for another hour. It was clear this was no longer just about my suspension. It was about the policy itself. Finally, the district rep made a decision. "The 3-day out-of-school suspension is overruled," she declared. Harris's jaw dropped. However, a violation did occur. It will be reduced to a 1-day in-school suspension. A note will be placed on your record, but it will be flagged as under district review and will not be shared with any college or scholarship committees pending that review. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a victory. She then announced a formal district-level inquiry into the school's language access policies and interpreter services. I served my 1-day suspension in a windowless room, missing my chemistry lab, which dropped my grade from an A to a B. The social cost was real, too. Some teachers were now cold, some students whispered, but others, the ones who'd been silent, started to meet my eye, offering small, quiet nods of support. 2 weeks later, a district-wide memo went out, announcing a new emergency exception for language use in medical or safety situations. It also mandated that schools must honor interpreter requests for parent meetings. Harris, in a school-wide assembly, read the memo in the most narrow, begrudging way possible. But the rule that had terrorized us was finally broken. My scholarship committee, after receiving a letter from Mr. Guidry and the hospital, cleared my file. I submitted an op-ed to the school paper about what it felt like to be half-voiced. Other kids came up to me sharing their own stories. The last week of school, I passed Mr. Harris in the hall. We didn't speak. But I didn't look away. And neither did he.